All right. I'm sure that we still have more people coming in, but I am going to go ahead and get going. So welcome everybody to our March member meeting. We haven't had a member meeting in a while, so actually let me get this out of the way. There we go. Certainly want to thank our platinum sponsor, ProSearch. They've been a great sponsor of ours for many, many years. And our current and only silver sponsor is the University of Southern Maine. So if you want to be a sponsor, by all means, love to have you. So tonight's agenda, we're going to welcome in some new members who've joined us in both February and March. I'm going to take a minute and recognize everybody who became certified back in 2020. We haven't acknowledged them yet, so I certainly want to acknowledge them because COVID, if you pass that test, excellent. We want to acknowledge it. Got some additional notes, and then we'll move on to tonight's presentation. So, new members, some in February and March, Gary Soroy, Eric Matiag, Estrella Pichette, Brett McGillivray, Justin Curry, and in March, Susan Burnham, Linda Lawrence, Stephen Molina, and Dan Peabody Harrington. So welcome everybody. And newly certified, and like I was saying, you know, during the year of COVID, this is the first half of the list. So we have quite a few who received their PMP certification last year. So Jeff McClellan, Elizabeth Klausner, Kyle Jellison, Carla Ritchie, Kendall Fassett, Eric Madiag, Jason Mitchell, Sebastian Rosner, Jenny Manago, Henry Levesque, Justin Michael Smith, Julianne Sullivan, Bridget Perry, Colin Badazzari, Bryce Davis, Madeline Valentine, Carla Routhier, Egan Visker, and Naomi Bennett. So congratulations to all of you. Quite an accomplishment. So just some quick additional notes. We do have our annual meeting. We had postponed it from January, but we're going to have it March 30th. And in that meeting, we are going to vote on bylaw changes to the president position. So currently it's a 2-year position, and the change would be to make it a 1 year as a president-elect, 1 year as the president, and then 1 year as past president. So please join us. Love to go over what we're planning to do for this year and hold that vote for the bylaw change. Also, volunteer opportunities. If you're looking to earn PDUs or you just want to be a part of something like this, then by all means, we'd love to have you helping out. So we'll take any time you can give. Just contact Dawn Place. She's the Director of Volunteers at volunteers@pmimaine.org. So without further ado, Jim, I'm going to turn it over to you to present tonight's topic.
Okay, thanks, Steve.
Sure.
All right. So tonight's topic, I'll get an introduction of myself in a minute. But the idea is what had happened was Suzanne, I think, had seen an article I co-wrote with a colleague of mine called I Was a Project Manager Before Agile. Am I Now a Dinosaur? I'll give you the answer. I won't hold you in suspense. The answer is no. However, it's going to take some work on your part not to be that, because change is not easy. So I have a variety of certifications. You see a few there. Member of the Mass Bay chapter. I'm down in Burlington, Mass. I've been a member since 2001. That's when I got my PMP as well. So just coincidentally. And 3 of my good friends are ex-PMI chapter presidents, all women as it happens. I'm still in touch with all 3 of them, 3 of them pretty regularly. So here's my background. Let me know if there's any sound issues or you can't see the screen or whatever. I clean my screen especially for you guys. That's a joke. 25 years project management. I was a network engineer, background in IT. Obviously, I gravitated from IT, deploying things. I do a lot of IT stuff. Pharmaceutical, for whatever reason, I fell into that. Financial really equals fidelity. I'm independent. I've been independent since 2003. If you're independent, you're going to want to put Fidelity at some point in time. I've run everything from if it's project management, I've done it. Small course or development to multi-million-dollar international software. I got a bunch of certifications. I started making a shift towards Agile in the past few years. I got my certified Scrum Master. I'll tell you why, because I teach a lot of PMP. In fact, I'm teaching it this very week. We were discussing it beforehand, virtual session. And I sort of felt like, I know it was a money expenditure on my part. I should know something about this, but also be able to tell my students about it. It turned out to be, like so many things, a really good idea. I wish I'd gotten it sooner. I do PMO setup. I recently set one up in the Middle East without going over there. That was an adventure. I talked on that at a roundtable down here recently. Just finished a gig working on our HR-based IT project for San Francisco company, rollouts, decommissions. I co-wrote a book with my colleague, Rich Meltzman, about running meetings. And Agile Collaborative down there is just myself and Lalique Massarian. She was one of the ex-presidents a long time ago of the local chapter. Agile Collaborative is not a company. We just loosely band together to do Agile stuff. So you can see that I've become very Agile friendly, but it's not an easy road. I want to talk about that if you're not quite there. I don't know how you guys want to handle questions, save them to the end or send them over to me. That's entirely your call.
Jim, I'll be monitoring the chat. And do you want me to interrupt you, or do you want to just wait till the end?
My thinking is this, what I typically do, if something needs clarification, maybe interrupt me. And if it's a question that feels like it can wait, then we can wait to the end. How's that sound?
Sounds great.
That's me. That's my avatar. What we'll talk about now, what Suzanne and I talked about when she asked me to do this was pretty much everybody knows Agile to some extent, but my counter to that was it's not always the case. But I need to introduce Agile and Waterfall briefly so I can compare and contrast them and talk about hybrid of those two, which is where we're going to go. So project life cycles, what the roles are in Scrum, because if you're going to go into Agile, it's likely you're going to go into Scrum. You might be Kanban or XP or others, but Scrum is by far the most popular variant of Agile. And SAFe, Scaled Agile, is the most popular variant of that. So hybrid projects, everybody said to me, you have an advantage because you have Waterfall, traditional Waterfall as a background, and you can slide it at Agile. That's true and not true. I'll talk about that. PMI has a new hybrid micro credential. I'll talk about that. It's still in beta. I'll tell you how I stumbled on that. I'm going to position a couple of hybrid tools. My colleague and I who do that Agile Collaborative, she teaches at a college and I co-taught with her a couple of classes. The challenge is in adopting hybrid. The challenge is not adopting anything quote unquote new or the same. People somewhat fear change. And I say possible next steps in your journey. I had said next steps. It's not for me to dictate to you what your next steps are. It's just a matter of what you might consider going forward. But I wanted to present my own Agile journey. Waterfall trained PM, project manager, pre-PMBOK, and then got into the project management body of knowledge, became a PMP. It was all Waterfall. And that will seem like ancient history one day. As I mentioned, read about Agile, got certified Scrum Master certification in 2013. It's a couple-day training. It's cheaper these days, $600-700. And learn the basics. You do learn stuff about how to run a sprint. Started gradually getting more involved in Agile, but not to the exclusion of Waterfall. I was not a zealot. There were some Agile zealots and probably Waterfall zealots as well. I was neither of those. I'm a plumber with a toolkit, right? I discovered that my Agile world did not necessarily see my Waterfall experience as a plus. Let's stop there for a minute. I thought, well, I've been doing project management for a long time and they'll welcome me with open arms. That has not happened. I'm here to tell you, even in very recent experiences, it's almost like they see Waterfall experiences as negative. Well, you're a project manager, you come in, you're large and in charge, you run the team. We don't work that way in Agile. We coach people, we're servant leaders. Are you saying to me that I can't do that? No, we're not saying you can't do that, but show us 3 years of Scrum Master, show us 5 years of coach. I didn't have that, right? I have some of that stuff now, but at the point in time, I was just stunned that they wouldn't just, see that background. It was almost like I might as well have been an astronaut for all they cared about my Waterfall experience. I'm telling you that, that's just the nature of the beast. This is our first challenge. But I'll talk more about that. I recently obtained a new PMI hybrid credential. Talk about that a bit, get slides on that. The first hybrid projects, hybrid being Agile and Waterfall, I worked on were at Fidelity. Fidelity is actually one of the original adopters of Scrum. I don't know if you know that, but if you look at the Scrum guide, and there's a new Scrum guide 2020, I went to the webinar for that. At the bottom, it says, names 3 or 4 companies, one of which is Fidelity. Although it's not, as I found out from being there, it isn't accepted everywhere or isn't used equally everywhere. But when I got there, the IT manager asked me to create a Gantt chart that will also reflect sprints. Well, instant hybrid. She didn't use the word hybrid. But think about your traditional manager in a company like a Fidelity. She wants to see Gantt chart. Her manager wants to see a Gantt chart, whether it's milestones or whatever. It doesn't matter. That's what she wanted to see. But since she was also in an agile world, she wanted to see sprints. Well, it turns out that Microsoft Project, for at least the last half a dozen years, maybe more, has the capability, and for the reasons we mentioned here. Now, I'm going to have a tool section later. But just to give you an idea of this, I'm jumping ahead a little bit intentionally. This is just a very generic. I got this from the Microsoft Project User Group. So you can put it when you start your Microsoft project. Some of you may know this. You can actually put sprints in there. You can start a waterfall project, and I'll show you the screens for that later, or a sprint type of a project. And you can put sprints in. You can imagine there. You see where the click down is, where it says Agile Demo right at the top. I could go above that and put in my my waterfall stuff. So, a classic case of that might be something like we were doing at Fidelity, where we were doing a certain amount of planning. And the planning was very predictive, and it was predictable, and had been done a million times before. So that part of the schedule was pure predictive, pure waterfall. But when it got to doing the sprints, then we could put it in here and show it. Now, you might say, well, wait a minute. Don't they also use a tool like Jira, which is, what manages sprints? Yes, they do. Is this redundant? Somewhat. Did she want it? Yes, but she got it, right? So I created a schedule that had the waterfall part, the sprints, but we're running the sprints from within Jira. But sometimes I think there's redundancy of reporting. And Fidelity, God love them. I love working there, but these guys have reports, 5 reports for every one thing. So that's basically the nature of it. I wasn't really managing the sprints from this. We were doing it from Jira, but this was more a reporting type of a thing. And that's how we handled a hybrid situation. By the way, I'm fond of saying there's 4 types of projects: waterfall, agile, hybrid, and whatever. As a consultant, I work on a lot of whatever projects. You know what I mean? Kitchen sink projects. Well, we don't know if we're agile or waterfall, or we heard of all this stuff, but here's an Excel spreadsheet, get to work. Or whatever, right? So that's my whatever project. Kanban board. I'm jumping ahead here too, just to give you the flavor of that, of what you probably already know. There's, Kanban board, show you the to do, in progress, and done. So that was our combination here for this glorious schedule that I had to show to management here for the actual people doing the work. Sometimes we would do it on stickies. It's still done on stickies fairly often. And also in Jira. I know one guy, J.J. Sutherland, is the son of Jeff Sutherland, who is one of the developers of Scrum. He's at, excuse me, I think he works at Scrum, but he also speaks frequently, is associated with Boston University. And whenever I go to one of his seminars, I'm reading one of his books, he shows projects he worked on, and it's all stickies. So this is not, old news. What is Agile? Framework for organizing and managing work. There's various elements. This is not an Agile, learning Agile session. So variants of it, definitely the most popular one is Scrum. And I would think that Kanban, the bottom one there, is probably a close second. The other ones have smatterings of it. But the essentials of Agile tend to be similar to each other. Scrum has more roles than Kanban. Kanban is just where you are now and visually working from where you are now. Agile Manifesto, individuals' interactions over processes and tools, working software over comprehensive documentation, customer collaboration over contract negotiation, and responding to change over following a plan. And this is really the heart and soul, folks, of why am I showing something you may have seen 100 times and you may already be an Agilist? Because responding to change over following a plan is one of the fundamental disconnects between traditional waterfall and Agile. If you go by the PMBOK, the Project Management Body of Knowledge, plan, execute to that plan. Whereas the Agilists look at it and say, no, we'll respond to change frequently. We, the Agilists, think that all that paperwork you do is insane. All that process you do is insane. We don't do all of that. So this is part of a challenge of bringing ourselves in. I want you to think of this from a point of view of not what is Agile, but what hurdles do I have to overcome to not be a dinosaur or be seen as a dinosaur by the people who would hire you to do these positions. There's Scrum, backlog on the left, Scrum team. And this is important because if you're not going to be a dinosaur, you got to be in one of these roles. A Scrum Master, your choice of roles, if you're not an Agilist, if you're not a Scrum person, if your company were to go Agile, if your management came and said, we are going 100% Agile in a year, your choices would be Scrum Master, Product Owner, part of the development team, Agile Coach. I'll repeat that. You could be a Scrum Master, Product Owner, Development Team, Agile Coach, assuming there was no traditional project management being done anymore, because there is no project manager. You might say, hey, Jim, I look on the internet all the time and I see Agile Project Manager. Yeah, because they don't know what they're talking about. In fact, there's an agency that I work through to get assignments, and it says Agile Project Manager. And I said, there's no such thing. I said, we know that. Our customers don't necessarily know that. So very often the Agile Project Manager job that you see could be hybrid, could be Agile, could be whatever. You got to dig deeper into that. So those are the roles that you have. Now you might be thinking, what do I do if I choose not to go into Scrum? We'll talk about that. Oh, and by the way, this Scrum piece is based on Scrum 2019. Scrum 2020 no longer calls it a potentially shippable product increment. They call it a valuable, useful increment, because people are getting confused about, do I have to ship after every sprint? So I bring that. And by the way, Scrum guys are 11 pages long now, so they really shrunk that down in size. So think about those roles and whether you fit in. Of course, Waterfall looks like this, traditional Waterfall. Showing this to my students today for the PMP thing. I go forward and down. I can iterate some. So look at the fundamental difference. Scrum is iterative. Look at that circle in the middle. Waterfall is down and flowing forward. There's no right or wrong there, right? And it tends to be that Scrum is more for those things that are discovery, those things that are emergent, R&D like uncertainty, whereas Waterfall is for very certain types of things you've done a million times. Some people will tell you that Waterfall, here's an important point to know, Waterfall is not obsolete. Some of the Agilists will have you think that. I tell them, well, then the building you're currently in will collapse any minute, because it was probably built with Waterfall. Those people that put that rocket on Mars, I don't know from inside information. I'm going to bet it was a Waterfall. So, or that ship on Mars. So, bridges, construction, largely Waterfall. So it hasn't gone away. What will it look like in 10 or 20 years? Agile isn't taking over, but it's inching in. And I don't think it's a bad thing. One more thing about the differences between them. This is part of the mindset you have to adopt. In plan-driven, we have a fixed scope, estimated resources, estimated time. Whereas in Agile, we have fixed resources, fixed time, and estimated scope. Why estimated scope? Because you have sprints. And every sprint, you're looking at the scope and changing the scope as you go. In a plan-driven, hey, if we're going to make that refrigerator, at the end of it, it better be a refrigerator. I joke with my students and say in the Agile world, they might ask for a refrigerator, but they might change their mind and get to a toaster on the way. And it's okay, because that's the nature of the beast. And I think this is also part of what the Agilists might think if we traditional project man. I say we, because I have a lot more Waterfall than Agile. If we're trying to break in there, Jim's going to come in and he's going to be a fixed scope kind of guy, and he doesn't really know how to work with a team. Are they, overlooking my 20-some years of managing teams, right? Or he hasn't really run scrums, and he hasn't been. I've done that since, but this is the first noise that I got. This is our first challenge to overcome. Here's a comparison. Scrum is change-driven. Waterfall is plan-driven. I won't go through everything here. Self-organizing teams. There's a big one right there, because from either side, the Agile people say, we self-organize, and you as a project manager are very used to telling people what to do in a command and control situation. And again, the thought may be, hey, this guy can't make the transition. He's going to come into my sprints and start telling people what to do. If where you have to not be a dinosaur is to be cognizant of this and change your mode. If I was working on two projects right now, one in the morning, one in the afternoon, and the morning one was Waterfall, pure Waterfall, where I'm large and in charge, and the afternoon one was pure Agile, then in the morning I have to wear my hat that's large and in charge and in command, and in the afternoon walk in and say I'm a scrum master. Now I have to be a servant leader. I'm not managing anybody. I'm coaching, I'm serving them. And I have to make that shift in mindset because, again, there is no true real project manager on the Agile side. It just doesn't exist, no matter what they call it on the internet or in jobs that you see. The other things are important, but the important thing here is, and I want to say one other thing. You will see a lot of misnomers on the internet. You can trust me when I say not only is there no project manager, but also that it isn't naturally a transition from project manager over to scrum master. Sometimes the scrum masters come from within the teams. It might be a software developer. Could be anybody who has the ability to take on coaching and servant leadership. But it's the only role that seems to be open to us. Think of, there's one more. I'll talk about that. I did mention, but I'll talk about it some more. On project approach, which I threw this in, the Stacy complexity matrix. I actually found this in the Pinbook, but I found a different picture of it. And there's a video about it. The more we go from bottom left to top right, we don't want chaos. But within these, the more complicated. I'm not really crazy about the simple versus complicated model. Really, it's more the close to certainty and far from certainty is what I care about here. So in the bottom of the x-axis, close to certainty, I might do the predictive planning, which is Waterfall-ish, Pinbook, and far from certainty might be the Agile stuff, and somewhere in there, adaptive is for our purposes Agile. Somewhere in there might be the hybrid version. But the hybrid really is if there's a predictive piece that you've done a million times, and it's certain, and there's an uncertain piece that might be for the Agile side. Seems to work better that way. One of the problems we had with Waterfall is that we think we know what the customer wants, and the customer thinks he knows what he wants. But at the end, there's this thing that looks this Rubik's Cube looks nothing like what the customer asked for. That's not always the case in Waterfall, but it can lend itself to that because we're not in close enough contact. We're not showing the customer. We're not necessarily building in increments.
So Jim,
Yep.
Becky makes a comment regarding the topic of Agile project managers.
Mhm.
What if you work for an organization that has a PM team and a Scrum team? In this scenario, the PM managed the development portion along with creating launch plans at a strategic level.
Mhm. So what's the question? I get the scenario. What's the question within that?
So she was just making the point. What if you work for an organization that has both a PM team and a Scrum team? So when it comes to an Agile project managers. So
And where would the fit be? Is that really the question around that?
I think she's just outlining two different possibilities. Yes.
Right. And in that case, really, let's put it this way. It comes down to the company in this sense. I don't know the specific environment, but some companies, let's be honest here and say not all companies understand either project management or Agile, right?
Mm-hmm.
They don't get either one necessarily. So I can't speak globally and say all companies would say, no, you, the project manager, can't come in and run this Scrum team, but they should because they're different philosophies. So if a company says you're a project manager, you're doing Waterfall stuff, can you do the Scrum stuff? And if the project manager feels like they can go in and do that, that's fine. If the company thinks it works, because at the end of the day, the only thing that matters is results. But if I were in that situation, I would be trying to take off my project manager hat and become more of that Scrum. In fact, I would go to the Scrum team with a certain amount of humility. And I would say, and I would adopt first a servant leadership approach and say, what do you need from me, Scrum team? I'm a project manager over here. Do you need that? You can play dumb a little bit. No, we don't need you to direct us for self-organizing. We need you to coach us. We need you to remind us of the best practice. That's what I would do. And I would suggest, again, some companies might be taking the project manager and putting them in both roles. But I think that might do a disservice to the Scrum side of things. That's my thought on it anyway. Project life cycles is 3. Predictive, that's typically where Waterfall lives. Adaptive, that's typically where Agile lives. We're adapting. Three key terms in Scrum: transparency, inspection, and adaptation. Transparency, everything is open. Inspect and adapt is the heart and soul. So this is one of the big differences between Waterfall and Agile. In Waterfall, it isn't that we don't adapt or we don't change. Change is difficult in Waterfall. I know what you want, Mr. Customer. It's change the scope or carefully manage it. If you want to change something, you put it in a change control request and it goes to a change control board, etc. Adaptive and the Agile one, you want to make a change? Oh, good. We'll change it the next sprint. We'll change the middle of the sprint if we have to. We don't prefer to, but if we have to. And the combination of predictive and adaptive, we call hybrid again. Is hybrid, you might be asking, is hybrid where we're going? You know, I don't know that anybody can answer that question yet. Agile is still, in a way, Agile, I think, is still in its relative infancy. I mean, people were doing Agile-like things before the Agile Manifesto. I've talked to people and read people who were doing it in the 90s and stuff, some flavor of it. So, but the penetration of Agile still seems to be, you can find the Agile reports that come out every spring. State of Agile, it hasn't gone much above a 10, 15% level of penetration. So it isn't like Agile is taking over the world. It feels like it sometimes. That's also because I'm immersed in this particular profession. But then again, there are places you can go in. I've said this to my students earlier today. The last place I contracted at in Cambridge, everybody was like 30. And they came out of school and went right into Scrum and they never heard of Waterfall. All they went into and they said, here, you go in here and we run sprints. And they said, okay, that's just the way it is. So there's another world out there that's like, you know, completely separate from that.
So how is the rolling wave planning different from adaptive?
Well, good question. Let's go over what rolling. Weirdly, I had to write something up on rolling wave planning. The idea of rolling wave planning is that in I don't have a slide on this, but in Waterfall, you plan out as far as you can see. Let me give you an example of that. Let's say we have a 3-year project, and in rolling wave planning, we plan for what we can see. Let's say we can see clearly for, in a 3-year project, let's say we can see pretty clearly for 3 to 4 months. So we detail at a very close level for 3 to 4 months. But as we roll in, our wave rolls into the 4th month. We then push, we keep getting more detail for the following couple of months. So that's the idea of rolling wave planning, is we plan in detail with things we can see close. There's a certain flavor of that in Agile too, but the difference is Waterfall, even with rolling wave planning, is still largely predictive. You know, what I just said about planning for 3 months out or 4 months out or 6 months out, and we know pretty well what it's going to be. Yeah, the Agilist might plan for 3 or 4 months out, but it's a very loose plan. You know, I'll plan a Waterfall side for 4 months out in a rolling wave fashion. I'll plan a release plan for a long term, but I'm really planning for the next 2 weeks of my sprint. So it's very much of an adaptive thing. It's very much a change. Remember, the fundamental difference, even with the existence of rolling wave planning, is the fact that in Waterfall, I believe that I understand the customer's requirements fully and that I can plan for long pieces of time. In the case of Agile, I believe that neither I nor the customer necessarily fully understand what it is until we see it as it's being born, as it's emergent, and I can do that. So there's parallels, but they're definitely different methodologies. And it comes down to that change-driven versus plan-driven. And it comes down to the belief that in predictive or in Waterfall, customer knows what he wants, she wants. And in Agile, the customer isn't really sure and needs to see it being born, which, by the way, that's me. This is what I like about it. I'm the kind of guy that has this show. When I took my certified Scrum Master class, I played product owner. And in the product owner and my teams, we were going to create a brochure. And they said, what kind of brochure do you want? And I said, I don't know. I was being sincere because I'm not a visual guy in that sense. They showed me a trifold and a bifold. And I said, I like the trifold. That's your customer. He knows what he wants. She knows what she wants, but they don't really know what they want until they see it. And Agile adapts to that much better than predictive. Scrum roles. Now, I want to bring these up because if you're a Waterfall guy or gal, these are the roles available to you. Product owner. The product owner is a business role. She is the person, think of product manager sort of, but the product owner is the person that within the business understands the product, and maintains the product backlog. The product backlog is a list of all the requirements that will ever be called user stories, but requirements for the product. It's a constantly groomed document. And she's keeping up to date and she's prioritizing it for business value. There's another major difference. We talk about business value on the predictive waterfall side, but I can tell you as somebody who's spent a lot of time with the PMBOK, they talk about business value, but it didn't feel as emphasized. Whereas in Scrum, as in Agile, they're constantly thinking business value. So the product owner comes to the first sprint and says, I've got this prioritized according to business value. 2 weeks later, the market shifts. COVID. This isn't exactly an analogy, but I have a colleague who his whole thing was, as a consultant, is helping people make better presentations. He actually has coached TED Talk people. COVID hit, nobody wanted to make presentations anymore, or at least not, they are now, but for a point in time that wasn't happening. He shifted his model to do more online stuff. His business value model shifted. So he was doing that. And I think a lot of people's business value, Agile allows for that. If you find out from the market that what you're selling, people aren't buying. The development team there's another role you can be in if you're a project manager, the development team. Now, Agile Scrum is being used increasingly for other things like HR. My daughter's in HR at a biotech company, and she's going to go for a master's in that. And one of the courses is Agile in HR. And there are other places, but let's say by and large, it's mostly a software development thing. So if you're going to be on a development team, if you're going to shift from a project manager, your second alternative is development team. And the other thing with a self-organizing team, and now you're on a team self-organizing rather than being the person large and in charge, is you have to be a developer or a QA person or a technical writer or something if you're on a software team. I know for me, that wasn't a non-starter. Now, Scrum Master is not a project manager. He or she facilitates the Scrum Master process. So the difference is, let's go back to the project manager for a minute. I think I have a slide in that. The project manager comes in and says, he cracks the whip. I mean, relatively speaking, right? Okay, here's the schedule. Mary, you're doing this. Engineering team, you're doing that. Go forth and do those things. Report back to me. There could be some coaching in there, but it's not the heart and soul of it. In the Scrum Master side, you go in humbly as a servant leader and say, what can I do for you? So I'll give you an example. A Scrum team comes to you and says, one thing you do is remove impediments. The Scrum team comes to you and says, we can't get a conference room. I'll say, I'll get you that conference room. We can't get something stuck in purchasing that we need. I'll get it unstuck from purchasing. A VP keeps coming down and bugging us to do something else. I'll go talk to her. Fourth scenario, they come to me and say, what do I do next? I say, I don't know. It's up to you. Take it to the team. Go to the team and ask them. I don't manage you. You manage yourselves. Right? So it's a completely different role. It's a humbling role. And so if you're used to cracking that whip, there's no whip cracking, right? If there's any whip cracking, it's the team among itself, and it's not even called that. There's a commitment among the team itself. Those are your options. Plus one. Oh, right here, Jeff Sutherland, co-creator of Scrum, said, I heard him say this. If you have a project leader or a project manager, you will generate priority conflicts that will slow teams down. Project manager does not exist in Scrum. I heard him say that on a webinar. He's one of the creators of it, wrote the Scrum Guide, still around. These guys are all here. The Scrum org is right here in my town, Burlington. Scrum Inc. is in Cambridge. There was just no role for that. Were they worried about our jobs? I think so. Scrum Master. I blew this one out, not the other ones. No management authority, no decision-making authority, facilitate Scrum, helps the product owner convert the feedback to backlog, servant leader, environment conducive to it. Take it to the team. I'll tell you where I got that from in a minute. If that person comes to me from the Scrum team and says, what do I do now, Jim? I say, take it to the team. Well, the team can't figure it out. Okay, I'll coach you. You won't tell us what to do? No, but I will coach you. That's the way it works. Doesn't matter if we like it. That's the way it works, right? Now, at least that's the theory. But the best ones I've seen performing and doing it are adhering to that. There is also this Agile Coach. I've never quite figured out exactly when or where the Agile Coach came in. I can't find it in the literature, but this woman, Lissa Atkins, she's it. She's it. She's going to be a keynote speaker at a thing I'm going to. She wrote Coaching Agile Teams a number of years ago, and it's still like the book that we all read. Look what it's called: A Companion for Scrum Masters, Agile Coaches, and Project Managers in Transition. In transition to what? Well, guess what? Going back to my experience, I looked at Scrum and I said, I'm not giving up project management, but if I get involved in the Agile world, what would I like to be? I like the idea of the Agile coach because, and this may appeal to a lot of you, a Scrum Master, yes, is also a coach. And a Scrum Master, yes, may Scrum Master or lead, or I shouldn't even say the word lead, coach and help with one or two teams. But very often an Agile coach will come in at enterprise level. I'll give you another example. When I was working at Fidelity, they had Agile Coach, Dialogue Coach. I'm calling it that. They didn't call it that. And if a new Scrum team was coming together, where do we start? Well, they can call up the Dialogue Coach, and a coach would come over and help them set the mindset. The very things that I'm telling you. You don't do project management? No, you work in a sprint, et cetera, and coach them through that. See, if these things the coach does: facilitator, teacher, coach member, et cetera. Coach mentor, I'm sorry. I thought for a while I would give up project management and go into pure Agile coaching. And I found that no, it was just another arrow in my quiver. This is for me. You can do whatever you want. Some of you might say, oh, coaching. Kind of had it with project management, right? But coaching will be fun. And you can even coach not only team members, but also senior members of the organization. Need coaching as much or more. Because what happens in Agile, we push decisions down to the team level. JJ Sutherland, I told Jeff Sutherland's son in one of the webinars, I said, whenever he does transformations and he does all the stickies in the wall, he teaches or it's a teacher for everybody from the CEO down. Now that may seem extraordinary, but he teaches that they don't become certified Scrum Masters, but they learn it pretty well. He's trying to get senior management to buy into the whole idea so that they're not working against the ideas that are within Agile. But this is a good role. So I thought of going into it entirely, which would make me not a dinosaur. But I've rethought it and decided to add it to my quiver. But I'll tell you something else that's important. Now that I've had 8 years of Agile, a couple of years of Scrum Master, about a year or so of Agile coaching, I recently was approached about a job coaching at the Agile enterprise level. This is literally like 2 weeks ago. And the guy said, love your project management experience, but not enough Scrum Master for me. But I give up, right? So, I mean, there's that. So what do I do? Do I spend 2 more years being a Scrum Master so that I can get that kind of a thing? So there's that. The Agilists, the people doing pure Agile, aren't interested in your project management thing unless you can somehow make it a plus. And I'm trying to show you where you can, which is adding coaching skills, adding Agile, and leveraging your hybrid, leveraging your waterfall. Project manager, just differentiating. You know what he does, what she does, large and in charge, decision-making authority, wholly different role. And I want to emphasize, project managers can go into Agile. They can become Scrum Masters. There's nothing stopping that. But it isn't necessarily a one-for-one. If project manager never existed, it wasn't like Sutherland and Company were writing Scrum Master trying to align it to any particular role. They were aligning it to their approach is what they were doing. But we can do that. I've done it, right? But you have to put a different hat on. There's no project manager. Now, here's where it comes down to this. Can transfer to become a Scrum Master with some retraining and retooling. Another interesting role we can play. I remember when I was first teaching, after I got my Scrum Master, and I was talking my certified Scrum Master certification, and we can talk about certifications too, we will. One guy was telling me that he was managing or overseeing several Scrum teams, and we'd use tools like Microsoft Project in the background to sort of keep track of all the Scrums like I did in that schedule I showed you up front. So there's still some level of, I think that there's a level of program level management that the Agilists are sometimes overlooking because they're still, in my opinion, struggling with Agile at scale. And I think that's where we can come in if we worked at the enterprise level. I still believe that very much, that my Waterfall experience is a plus for them because I can easily kind of go back and forth between them. I'm sure you could too. So I mentioned those other things, Agile, they guide. If PMs want to enter the world of Agile, they got to retool, except it's a completely different role. Talked about that. Here's some hybrid examples. I mean, I'll stop here if there's a question. I'm good if there's one or two. I think we're good for time. Okay.
Oh,
Hybrid.
actually,
Is there one? Go ahead. Go for it.
sorry, Jim.
Yeah.
There's a couple.
Okay.
So Becky was asking, so where do project managers fit, or is this more pragmatic marketing rather than an agile role?
Sorry, that's a product manager.
Oh,
Sorry,
where's a
product
product
manager.
manager? Well, a product manager could be a product owner. I think there's no reason, because I know what a product manager does, and the product manager, oversees the life cycle of that product till it's decommissioned, if you will. There's nothing stopping that's a good question. A product owner could be a product manager could be a product owner, but you would need training in it, right? You want to, because you can't walk into most organizations and say, I've been a product manager, I can be a product owner. They're going to say, where's your credentials? So you'd have to get CSPO, I think, certified product owner training, get that certificate, and then, hit the bricks with that. But you have to have, I think that's a more natural transition than from project manager to scrum master. What's the other question, Steve?
So Margaret was saying, I've seen the product owner business paired with a business analyst IT as a successful combination. Do you have experience with that partnership?
I do not, but I think it's a great idea, because businesses are different. If we separate those out for everybody's edification, the product owner is the one that prioritizes. The business analyst goes and gets the requirements. I think it's a great idea. I haven't seen it, but I think it's a pretty sophisticated solution. I think that's good. My guess, though, let's be honest here. Companies like to save money. I say, why do I need both of them? I hate to say that, but a lot of times companies will say, why do I need both of them? Could you, the product owner, be the business analyst too? But if they'll accept that, I think it's a great solution. All right, let me roll on. Couple of hybrid examples. Pharmaceutical has not, let me just say something very clear. I spent a lot of time in pharmaceutical, and I have some good friends there, has not wholly adopted Agile. Partially they're regulatory, they're conservative, they have a lot of risk, as we know. So they're risk averse, I should say. So they may not use it, but this is an example that I saw. So in planning for major medical device, I worked in medical device and in drug development, recently in medical device. Their FDI and clinical trials are all predictable, well understood, but there's a groundbreaking nature to the software development that they need to do certain things, and that will be done iteratively. So it's a combination, that's a hybrid. Or here's an example that's very commonly quoted even by PMI. I found it today from their slides. I went to a manufacturing company, but I've seen this elsewhere, that was very invested in Waterfall, very resistant to change, and whose employees were resistant to the idea of Agile, except for one or two. So in this instance, we use hybrid to slowly bring them over. So we use familiar tools, Excel spreadsheets, Gantt charts, and started bringing them over. It's partially successful for a while. It was only there for a relatively short bit, but it was a real hard role because they were very conservative. And I mean conservative, small c, like change wasn't necessarily. We've been doing this since 1783. We'll continue doing it this way, right? And a financial services company, not in this case Fidelity, that developed a new product iteratively and then rolled out training to the company in a predictive fashion. So these are combinations. This is where hybrid comes. This is where you come in, I think, because if they want somebody who understands Waterfall and understands Agile, no offense to the 30-year-old got his master's and then went into the business world. He's never heard of Waterfall. She's never heard of Waterfall. So this is where I've been somewhat successful, is the people who, some companies don't get it. If you're not pure Agile, I don't want you. If you're not pure Waterfall, I don't want you. Some other companies or managers might say, I can see where both of those can help us. And some real world sort of hybrid. This is a place I just recently worked, an IT shop that used Waterfall to deploy new technologies and decommission older ones, which is we do all day long in IT. They create Gantt charts and Smartsheet. They would create a backlog in Jira and have weekly sprints. So it was a real mixture of that type of thing. I'm seeing that a lot. And a medical device firm that mashed everything together: Gantt charts, daily stand-ups, intermittent retrospective, servant leadership, project management. What can we bring to that table? Somebody interviewed me the other day and I said, what do you specialize in? I said, I specialize in making things better. There's a lot of good project managers, a lot of good agilists. But what I like to do is I think I leave it better when I leave than when I came in. So in a situation like that, I'll say, either do retrospectives or don't. If you're going to do them, let's do them right. Let's do them regularly. Really treat servant leadership right. So that was the thing. But This winds up being me very often when I work in this situation. It's like, what do you guys really want to do? Right? So they know all the buzzwords, right? And they sort of half know them. And you need, in fact, a good role for you is to be that person that really knows it. Be the smartest kid in the room. You read the Scrum guides. You're well trained in this stuff. You know how it should be done. Some of them may look to you as a savior in that case, because a lot of people, it's just, they can't even read a 10, 11 page Scrum guide. You be that person that does that. That's how I keep getting work, because I'm that person that does the homework, right? Now, the PMI micro credential. I was talking to Suzanne about this. She had never heard of it. Let me explain this. I'm talking to PMI here, but some of you guys may not even know this. PMI has half a dozen or more credentials: PMP, PMI, ACP, PGMP, etc. I found out this by accident on LinkedIn a month and a half ago. One of my contacts said, "Oh, I got the new PMI micro credential." I said, "What is that?" Rolling my eyes because I got enough credentials. Well, PMI has created these smaller, less expensive credentials, and I think they have a foundational one. And by the way, you see the URL at the bottom? I assume these slides will go out. This is right off of PMI's page. I gave credit here. They differ from high-stakes certification. They're focused on specific subjects, shorter and industry-specific, and help showcase your specialization, which is not a bad thing. Now, this particular one is called an Agile Hybrid Project Pro Micro Credential. Why did they create this? I can tell you exactly what. Well, PMI, I don't have a link to PMI where they answer my questions, but here's the thing. Think about this. PMP has been around for, I think, 30-something years. We have 1 million PMPs in the world-ish, and the great majority of them are Waterfall trained and may only have that. And now PMI, as of January 2nd this year, has an exam that tests on both 50% Waterfall, 50% Agile, and it's tough and it's real and it's the real deal Agile. So the average PMP, I think of my friend Rich. Rich is a long-term Waterfall guy. Got his PMP many years ago, and he feels a little bit like left out. Like, gee, am I a dinosaur? Because I don't have any kind of credential. And I said to him, well, Rich, there's this hybrid thing you can get from PMI. It was in beta. It's still in beta, so it'll be open up again in April soon. And what PMI is saying is, for the people who have been PMPs for a long time who want to show some Agile, you can study on your own, read the books, etc. There's a bunch of modules. It's a class you take online and get the certification. Put it on LinkedIn. I'm a PMP. I have this hybrid thing, and you can explain it and say that means I have some Agile and some Waterfall. Does that mean they're going to run to your door and hire you? No, but at least you've got some skin in the game, right? So what it is, I took it, and I'm going to show you a screen from it. They gave me permission to show it. It assesses your Agile and hybrid project management knowledge. It's a course. Currently, it was 20 modules is what I had, 20 modules I had to watch. If you're beginning to venture into the Agile hybrid space, right off their page, and it helps certification. There's the key thing. So align to new PMP standards. In other words, we don't want you to fall behind. You're never going to take the PMP again. How do we keep you up to date? And by the way, for those people that were telling me for years that Agile was some kind of a fad, does anybody here think that PMI would adopt a fad and put half of their exam in Agile if it wasn't a thing? It's an imprimatur, right? PMI is a leader in the world and the stuff, and if they're saying it, they're not necessarily the leader in Agile, but they're saying this is something to be taken seriously. How do I get it? Again, right off their site. 30 questions that must be completed in 45 minutes. You have to it says all 9 modules. I left that in intentionally. When I took it, I had 20 modules. Maybe they're rethinking it. Again, it's in beta. You can't take the beta anymore, but they're still evaluating the results. But again, the soft launch in April. If you're not past the assessment, I'll talk about cost in a minute. This is a screen. This is one that PMI gave me permission, and I'll show you the email for this. There's a guy running it. So here's what I did. This is literally like a month ago. Manage conflict, lead a team, support team performance, engage and support virtual teams, team. The new PMI PMP slides begin with team. It's what PMI learned from the Agile world. Team to the max. You don't see the word hybrid anywhere, but you get the idea. This is right. This is the modules that I watched. Maybe they were a half hour. Pretty well done scenarios, I thought, quite frankly. Well written, well thought out scenarios. And every once in a while, you'd be watching one like, I don't know, build shared understanding. And it would give you a scenario, and then it would pop up on the screen and say, warning, a bad thing has happened. And you would have solved that problem if you follow me, right? So they weren't PMP-like questions, but they were scenario. And they also had a bunch of URLs of articles you could read. One of the women I was talking to felt that the articles were a little bit out of date. I haven't read them all yet, but I'm sure they'll fix that. But this is the nature of what you got to watch, all the videos you got to watch. So this could be your training, but still would encourage you to get other. The ones that are in beta could be fewer. How do I get it? The price hasn't been settled yet, but PMI, they actually said $175, 175. I jacked it up to 200. I don't know. In and around there. That is my badge from getting it, as you probably know, when you get certified. Acclaim, the company Acclaim will get you a badge and you can put it up on LinkedIn, or you don't put it on LinkedIn, but you can connect to it so people can verify that you have it. Again, I wasn't going to get this, but the price for it was about less than half when I took it. I thought, what could it hurt? And I can talk to you guys like you about it, right? I mean, that's part of what I do as an instructor is I like to stay ahead of you so I can tell you something about it. I'll take a few of the arrows for that. So I think it's good, but if you're a project manager and you have zero Agile, you can certainly get it, some of it from this. But if you're going to start veering, I'll talk about your choices in a minute. I'm getting ahead of myself. Courses based on realistic scenarios take 6.5 hours to complete. You'll be tested on Agile and hybrid project methodologies. Actually, this kind of differs. This is from their page too. It differs. I don't know how many questions it's going to be. So what you can do is ask them. I think the numbers have changed since I first took it, but it took me, I think it took me about an hour and a half to take it. I think there were 60 questions. There's no application. The PMP has a lengthy application. There's none. You just pay. Boom, right? And it's on your portal. You receive a digital badge. I showed you that. Here's another piece of good news. You get a ton of PDUs. Technical leadership and strategic. So I got those, although I don't need them. I'm good till like 2023. I don't know what a soft launch means, but April 2021. Here's the contact. If this floats your boat, write to these people. I almost want to say the guy, I forget the guy's name, but it's been one guy answering me every time. He might answer you in a couple of days. He's the guy that gave me the authorization to use that page. You know, it'll tell you might tell you when it's going to happen. And study modules, I showed you, manage conflict, team performance, cooperate with stakeholders. They don't say hybrid, but it's baked into it. In my opinion, as well written as the scenarios were, if I were to feed back to them, and I think I did, I would make it even more hybrid-y. I felt it wasn't quite that enough. But again, you know, PMI is good with getting it right eventually. Now, tools for incorporating Agile into Waterfall. My colleague, Lalique Massarian, told you she was the past president of the local Mass Bay chapter. She's taking a college course, and last year she asked me to co-teach with her a couple of nights, 3 or 4 nights. One of the nights we did was a hybrid night. So we did some research, talked about Microsoft Project. I showed you that earlier. They started incorporating Agile in here. What I showed you was the outcome, but it looks like this when you enter Project these days. I thought I would get away from Project if I went into Scrum. It turns out not. In fact, there's plenty of places. I'm looking at a gig right now that's Waterfall, right? So there it is. So the first screen on the left is white, is traditional Microsoft Project, and that swirly thing there, the iterative thing, is Agile. So I can do a Scrum. And look at here. No sprint really means backlog, which is your requirements or your user stories. Sprint 1, Sprint 2, Sprint 3. And up here, my task board, planning, sprint, and manage. It's really, if you're in a pure Agile environment, this is of no use to you. Much better is Jira, tools like Jira, which I assume a lot of you may be familiar with, which really handles backlog and sprints and burn down charts. I got to know Jira really well at my last gig because they asked me to be the configurator for it. They didn't have enough people. So where does this come in? And what does MS Project or Microsoft intend? I think what they intend is if you want to have a hybrid situation, this is like from a scheduling perspective. Remember, Microsoft Project is a scheduling tool. So you can incorporate your sprints and over and out and do that. But if I were going to a pure Agile environment, this would not see the light of day. Here you see, I just give you a very simple example. Set up hardware, set up software, develop user application. It didn't need, that's my fake Gantt chart. If I go here, here are those same 3 things in sprints. Sprint 1. So what happens is you can assign them to the various sprints. So they become your backlog. When I enter those tasks, they become effectively my backlog. I could probably add a second screen in over here on the left and not start it, which is the backlog, and then move into their respective sprints. Again, would I do this if I was in a pure Agile environment? Definitely not, because it's just not the right tool for the job. And I think even Microsoft would admit that. But it's an adjunct tool. If your boss comes to you and says, hey, I know you're using Jira for sprints. Can you give me sort of a hybrid look? Doesn't have to be a Microsoft project, by the way. I'm using that as an example. Last place I was working, we're using Smartsheet. A Smartsheet is a more shareable, somewhat. The project tools that are easy to use tend to be dumbed down. Microsoft Project, we all have a love-hate thing with, right? It's complex and hard to use, but boy, is it a powerful scheduler. But if you're using something like Excel and Smartsheet, you can also do, you can't do a hybrid, but you can put your Gantt chart look in that and then your sprints into Jira. Redundant? Yeah, but there it is. Now, going the other way, incorporating Waterfall into Agile. It's Jira at the bottom. There's a task board in Jira. I just put a picture in for a graphic showing my various to-do, doing, done, etc. Within Jira, which is the traditional one, not traditional, I should say, but it has been for a while now, and my user stories, I run sprints, but it's pure Agile. You know, it's not thinking in terms of Gantt charts or whatever. It's thinking in terms of sprints. And so it's got a different think, right? But I discovered this product called Big Picture. Now I'm going to show you what this is. Big Gantt is this thing. This is a Gantt chart, traditional Gantt chart. Over here on the left, you can't see it really well, but I'll explain what it is. The very far left, those are epics and stories. So what you do is you have to take Big Gantt, and then you have, I forget what it costs, and then you take Jira, and you have to create like a data link between them. A little bit of a pain in the neck. You create a data link and understands that you're connecting this software, Big Gantt, over to this software, Jira. And now when you create a project in Jira, you can push a button and it will create this Gantt chart. Now you go to management and say, oh, look, here's your Gantt chart. But then if I click on the left on the epics of the stories, it takes me right back to Jira. It's kind of slick. Because one of the challenges I think for Agilists is how do you show that big picture if you're sort of anti-Gantt chart or whatever, if you're anti-Microsoft projects? There's got to be a way to do that. Management might say to you, look, we haven't had a wholesale change. One wholesale change we had in the past year is people working from home. I haven't seen a wholesale change of senior management saying, I don't want to see a timeline. I don't know that I'll ever see that. So I like to see a timeline. In fact, the guy that replaced me in the job in San Francisco, I was showing him the task board. He says, I can't see the big picture. I said, okay, I'll show you a schedule. Said, now I can see the big picture. So it's literally called Big Picture, right? So it's just a couple of tools that you can use if you want up in a hybrid situation. Now, some of the challenges in adopting hybrid. We're almost done here and almost ready for some more questions. Some organizations barely understand Waterfall, much less Agile. We talked about that up front. They're just like, you just get the job done. I don't care. One VP at one company said it to me, I don't care what you do, just get it done. Pure Agilists may see you imposing a hierarchy that they neither want nor see value in. All this process that you do in the hybrid, all these long documents that you write, I don't want any part of it. Lack of understanding by stakeholders who are used to one method or the other. That could be your customer. Knowing when and how to use it. I'm not going to use Microsoft Project where it's not called for. And stakeholder turnover. What I meant by there, kind of an unfinished statement there. You know, you're adopting hybrid, and then all of a sudden, your sponsor leaves, and a new sponsor comes in and says, "What is this? We did this at my last company, and I hate it." All right, so, you know, as a consultant, people will say to me, why don't you just do sort of whatever you think is the right thing to do? Because I have stakeholders that are my customers, and I can consult with them and advise them, but I can't do the wrong thing, right? If they want a particular thing and I'm not ethically opposed to it, I got to do it. Now, how can you leverage what you know? To not be a dinosaur. You cannot join an Agile project and say, I cracked the whip. I'm not interested in that. They're looking for servant leadership and coaching, and they're looking for years in, I'm going to tell you. They're going to look for at least 3 years in most cases. Maybe your best bet sometimes is doing it within the company you're already in. Your experience in Waterfall can be turned to a plus. It's up to you to say, hey, look, maybe my Agile experience is lighter, but I bet that I've got enough working across the enterprise. I can work with stakeholders. That might be an in for you. I have found that Agilists initially reluctant will welcome your breadth of experience. Not all, but they'll welcome your breadth of experience if you position in a way that's not antagonistic or like, oh, we Waterfall people know best. The whole Waterfall versus Agile thing is so silly, I won't get involved in it. I don't play that game. I'm open to that. But you must meet them where they live. I can't walk in and say, here's how we do it in the waterfall world. Oh, nice knowing you, right? Next steps for you, I recommend take your own personal inventory. Where do you want to be? If you want to be a project manager for the rest of your professional career, I'm going to gamble a little bit and say you probably can. Because I probably, a few years ago, I was getting more agile, like 8 out of every 10 job offers were agile. And lately it's been like half and half. And I'm looking from a consultant perspective, but you have agency, right? You can get out there and look for stuff too, just like I do. Maybe they're a job longer. My difference is I move faster, right? I move out faster, or I move on. Where do you want to be? Want to stay in project management? Find the places that are doing that. You want to be involved in Agile? Well, don't initially just run out and get certifications for the sake of having them. Don't get 10 of them. Sit down and think, okay, do some research. You're getting some research now for me in a sense. Talk to your peers. Look what jobs. I'm always telling people look at job boards. What's out there? What do they want? Do you fit in one of the Scrum roles? Scrum Master, Product Owner, Team Member, Agile Coach, even one of those. If not, if you're planning in a very traditional PM structure, you might get some Agile training anyway. Certified Scrum Master is bare minimum, no hands-on. If you go for Certified Scrum Master, it's gotten cheaper now, $500, $600, $700. It's 2 days training. You have the CSM. PMI ACP, which I also have, Agile Certified Practitioner, means I'm a PMP or I have the requisite project experience plus 8 months of Agile. I got that over a year ago. Consider the micro-credential. And in my opinion, if your boss says, hey, what's this Agile I hear about? Step up. Oh, you know, boss, I know something about that. Can I experiment with it a little bit? Google it. Do some YouTube videos. Talk to people, right? Read a book. Get out there and do that. But I think we want to avoid being this guy, right? One note before we get to question. Bonus. Latest buzzword, value stream. Nothing to do with hybrid per se, but when I took SAFe, Scaled Agile, it was all about the value stream. And it's a set of actions you take from the customer request through the customer receipt. You heard it here first. Scaled Agile framework and Discipline Agile, which is wholly owned now by PMI. So I hear that a lot. And we can have a discussion. Are the hybrid projects fit in your category? Or do you have any questions, or both? In the time we have remaining, I'll take questions. Are open. Floor is open for questions.
So, Jim, Linda had a question. What should a PM preparing for the 2021 do to prepare for the Agile sections of the exam? What
Good
classes
question.
would be of value?
Yes. Okay. So here's the thing. This is about the PMP, right?
Yes.
Yes. I'm teaching PMP, and here's the deal. Any good provider of PMP now, first of all, there's 2 levels of providers. One is the providers that are authorized training partners who are authorized by PMI. The authorized training partners have to use PMI's material. They have to. The non-authorized people like me don't have to, but I can license it, and I would choose to do that. The students in my class, there's about 10 of them right now, small class. About half of them, most of them have no Agile. The material I'm providing them in order to pass the PMP is sufficient. When I say I'm providing material that PMI is providing them, PMI has like 600 slides. I'm not joking. It's 200 more than we had before. The PMBOK has a bunch of Agile stuff in it. The PMBOK also has a separate Agile practice guide, which is about 150 pages. So if you have a good class and a good instructor, that is sufficient to get through the exam. But I'm going to tell you, you got to know it well. So there's that. And if you want to have an adjunct to that, I've told my students to read the Scrum Guide. And you can also pick up a good book like, oh man, I wish I had a handy here, like Essential Scrum. Essential Scrum by Ken Rubin. I'd like to maybe chat that out if I can find it, or if somebody else could chat that out for me. Essential Scrum by Ken Rubin is like one of the leading books. It can't hurt to read that. I'm not saying that alone is necessary to pass the exam. I think you have enough from a good instructor, but Essential Scrum will leave you with a very well-rounded understanding. But you don't have to first go get your CSM and then take the PMP. So the class should be enough. Other question?
For those who weren't following along in the chat, Chris did ask if any of the modules, and we were talking about the Agile hybrid micro certification, if any of the modules count toward your recertification requirement. which the suggestion was, yes, taking the training for the exam will give you 13 PDUs at least during the beta. Do you have any updated information on that?
No, I mean, I don't think they're going to change that. That's a pretty generous amount of PDUs. I can get that fact back. Let's bring that up. That's important. Here it is. 13 PDUs is pretty generous for a class. 4 technical, 3 leadership, 3 strategic. I think it's going to stay that way. And I think that's a reasonable distribution across that. Even if they did, maybe it would be 15, but it's pretty similar. But yes, and what happens, one of the beauty things about PMI, if you guys know this, if you take any kind of a PMI course, they automatically apply the PDUs. You just get an email and they apply them automatically, which is kind of nice. But right to these guys, you see micro credentials again, you get the latest details. You can get back in the day too. He's been pretty responsive. Where did I say that?
So Linda, you indicated that you took 35 hours last year at a local university, didn't include Agile. Yeah.
How long ago was that?
Yeah, I took it at Hudson College or Hudson University in Maine last May, but it didn't include any of the Agile material, and I didn't take my PMP exam last year. So I'm studying for my PMP now.
Right.
But I wanted to understand what supplemental Agile resources I should review to prepare for the exam.
Let me ask you this question. The place where I teach has Delta material. So people who did like you did can go back to my company, not my company, the company that I teach for, and they have a hybrid video, a Delta video showing the differences. So you might check and see if they have something like that. Very often they do, and they should. If they don't, then I would suggest make sure you have PMBOK 6. And PMBOK 6, you want to read the Agile Practice Guide cover to cover. And you want to also, within the PMBOK, there's a lot of Agile. Are you a PMI member?
Yes.
Then do you have the electronic version of the PMBOK?
I have the hard copy. I got it in my class last year. It's a 6th edition.
Yeah, but as a member, you can download a free PDF. And the reason I recommend it, you can search through it and find every instance of the word Agile in there.
Okay.
Right? That's what I love about it. You can find every instance and read it. So I would recommend go back to where you got the training, ask them if there's a Delta video or a Delta training. They might even charge you a couple $100 for it. It won't hurt, right? Secondarily, read the Agile Practice Guide. Third, go through the PMBOK and find every instance of Agile. Fourth, read the Scrum Guide. See if you can find the Scrum Guide 2017. We think it's bad. If not, you can contact me and I'll send you a copy. It's not like it's I can distribute it because it's hard to find the 2017 version. And lastly, if you still feel shaky about it, splurge $40-50 and buy Essential Scrum by Ken Rubin, cover to cover, because we believe we're gathering lessons learned that it seems like, for the obvious reason, the Agile component within the PMP exam is very Scrum oriented. If you go for the ACP, they'll test you on Kanban, NXP, and all these other things because it's more distributed like that. With those sources, you should be pretty good to go. But it's really is, as I'm learning, you really have to know your stuff from a theoretical point of view, right? You have to understand the theory code. That makes sense? Those are reasonable suggestions?
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. What else you got for me, Steve?
I don't have any others. Do anybody else have any questions? You can certainly take yourself off mute and ask them.
Hey there, Jim. So as I'm one of the recent members of Stephen Molina. So hello, everybody. Great.
Hi.
It's actually my first meeting, and I'm going to take a swing and say that I'm probably the most inexperienced project manager here.
Okay.
So I'm still in the, I just recently got onboarded with my job, and I'm going for the CAPM, soon here. What would you recommend for somebody just starting out? There's kind of these two, wouldn't necessarily say competing methodologies. A baseline of both, focus on one rather than the other. In my company, it's very much a waterfall oriented environment. So just wanted to get your opinion on that.
For everybody's edification, a CAPM is a PM, was designed as a PMP. People just like Steve coming out of school so they can learn the language. And if then somebody were to hire them in a company with a bunch of PMPs, he can speak their language. That's the whole idea behind it. He doesn't have enough years of experience to be able to do it. My take on it is, and I just actually spent a year mentoring a veteran overseas. He's the same, he's older than you, but in the same situation. And I said to him, get both. Work towards your CAPM. You're gonna have to get some certifications, no escaping. But you're investing in yourself, right? Spend the money, get the CSM, which is Certified Scrum Master. I would go on both paths because there is no indication whatsoever, and I'm not saying this because I'm on the phone with PMI, that the PMP is going away. You do your own homework and you look and it can say, I tell my students, it says PMP preferred or PMP required. You know what PMP preferred means? It means PMP required. Okay. So you want a PMP, right? The rest of them go in the round file. That's like the bare minimum. And so get your CAPM, work towards your PMP, and also consider going for at least a CSM. You'll be well grounded in that. You'll probably wind up being more involved in Agile stuff. But when they look at your resume, it doesn't matter whether it's Waterfall. They just know that PMP is a good thing.
Yeah.
Right? They just know. Most of the hiring managers aren't. I've had hiring managers say to me, you're a PMP, you must be a Microsoft project expert. And I say, yeah, I kind of am, but it's got nothing to do with it. They don't test on it. Maybe you can correlate it, but so they don't quite understand what it is. They just know it's a good thing. So I would go in both directions. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, I appreciate it. And great insight.
So Jenny's asking, is the CSM as equally as challenging as the PMP? I got my PMP last August. We are in a full Agile workshop, and there is plenty of experience to garner at work.
The CSM, I got to tell you, is the easiest exam I've ever taken in my life. Now, I took this in 2013. Here's what it was. I took a 2-day class, and it has to be by somebody who's certified to train that particular material. And he said the following. This may have changed. This is in 2013. The exam was, I think, maybe 50 questions, of which I believe you got to get 35 right. And you could take it from home, and it was open book. And you could, if you got stuck, email him to ask him questions about it, okay? The CSM is a definitional exam. If you can get through the class, you could probably take the test 2 days later. They are like, as the British say, chalk and cheese or something. They're so different. So the CSM is fairly, the downside of that on the marketplace is hiring managers kind of know that. They kind of know that you're a book learn thing, but it's the bare minimum to get in. So you see mine, PMI is extremely hard and it's harder than it was before. CSM is easy to understand and easy to get the certification. Coach has no exam, and the ACP is a hard one because you work your way up after having done Agile for a while. CSM is still to this day pretty easy to get. There's also another one called PSM1. There's 78, I counted them, 78 Agile certifications and counting. Do we need them all? No, but there are. So the PSM1 is, I think, by Scrum Alliance. I'm not sure. Professional Scrum Master 1. I took it for a specific reason, and you can test out on that. So you go to their site, you can test, and then there's no class you go to, and you study and you read books until you get their passing score, and you can have that. But given the two of them, CSM is probably better known than PSM1. PSM1 is a little bit harder to get, but if you want easy entry, CSM is the way to go. Not a hard exam at all. Nothing like the PMP. PMP is the hardest exam many people will ever take in their life. I never sugarcoat that. Why would I do that for my students, right? Other questions?
That's all I have.
Okay.
Jim, thank you very much. Greatly appreciate you coming to speak with us tonight. And thank you. Thank you, everybody, for attending.
Okay.
Hope you have a good night.
See you in Maine again sometime. Thanks,
All
folks.
right, sounds good.
Save the lobster for me.